right, welcome, ladies and gents, on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. I'm Tristan Jones,
I'm Marcy Gonzalez.
and we are the Watchers in the Basement. We're here today to talk about season 5, episode 3 of Yellowstone, um, titled "The Tall Drink of Water." Um, Really fun episode. A lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to discuss. Um, we start, Marcy. Any initial thoughts about this episode?
Yeah, this episode, I felt like it had a number of really great um, things that happened, especially toward the end. But I also felt that it was a little bit slow because it's setting up some plot points that I think will definitely be crucial later on. So it was definitely kind of a slow burn up until I guess like maybe those last 5 minutes when we do see just some craziness go down. So just kind of those were my initial thoughts on this episode.
I thought this is like the classic bait and switch episode where we spend so much of this episode seeing one side gaining an advantage to the point where you think like that conflict or that little battle is ending or just wrapping up in their favor, and then something always happens at the end
Mhm.
to show just how quickly certain people, and we'll talk about one character in particular, can snatch victory from the jaws of
Mhm.
defeat. But this was definitely that episode. Like you said, it's setting up some various plot points that we're going to see throughout the rest of the season. And one sort of one that I definitely want to talk about. So where do we want to begin? We'll start at the beginning. Or we?
Yeah, I guess let's start at the beginning. It started again with a flashback, which I interested to see if this is how most of the episodes are going to go. If we're going to have a lot more flashbacks, which I think gives a lot of context into what is happening now again with the wolves. It starts with the flashback again, where the wolves have been reintroduced and the ranchers are upset about it. And now in the present day, there's kind of like the drama going on with the shooting of the wolves on their land as well.
So the Flash, I'm trying to really get a grasp on how the I guess the larger, broader way that they're tying in these flashbacks to what's happening in the present. Obviously, yeah, with the Wolves, there's a tie-in there to show like this is an issue that has been going on for at least 15 to 20 years
Mhm.
or so. But I think I think these flashbacks are meant to show also or be a revelation to what John is going to have to do in order to like
Mhm.
really be successful at being governor and ultimately save this ranch from all these various threats that are coming against it. I think all of these memories that he's kind of conjuring up, and I don't know if this is just him. I guess that's a question to ask. Like, do you think that these flashbacks are meant just for us as the viewer, or are these like callbacks that John himself is having about his present position, um, and how these memories inform what he has to do going forward?
No, I think that's a really great point too, because then after kind of like that opening sequence with the flashback, we see John again sitting on his porch. He's deep in thought. And then Beth comes up and, she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm just kind of thinking about your mom." And then she kind of goes into like this. She says something interesting. She says, "Well, a memory can't love you back."
Mm.
So I think a lot of it is, again, just giving us as the viewers a glimpse of like, what has happened, but also what is might be going on in John's mind as to like previous struggles and present struggles, and then him just trying to reconcile with, okay, but now I have to kind of like struggle with not only the struggles that I have on my ranch that I've always had and kind of know how to take care of for the most part, but now I also have to do it for everybody else in Montana.
And I also thought it was interesting that the camera shot lingered on the door as he was leaving the office after the rally or whatever, the town
Mhm.
hall meeting with the rest of the ranchers, to show basically like his position has changed. Like he's on the opposite end now. Before he was
Mhm.
the one putting pressure on those
Yeah.
at the highest parts of power to get certain things done to protect his ranch, to protect the lifestyle, the rancher's lifestyle, and now he's on the other side. Now he's the one where people are going to be coming to him for favors or to just to put pressure on to get certain things done. And that's just more stress. But like you said, like he already has to deal with these just natural elements, wolves sneaking on, from on his property, wolves that they can't kill, by the way, like they can't really do that because they're, that's a felony. And he also has to deal with these subtle threats and things that he never really had to deal with because he's been on the outside of power. Like his power has been, like I said, subtle. It's been things that he's, worked up on the margins, and now he's front and center, and he has to deal with these things and deal with so many of these responsibilities. Let's talk about one of those threats, which is, market equities. We see Jamie coming into his office, and he's kind of blindsided by, the two representatives from market equities. What did you think about that scene? And like, how does that play into the larger plot points of this episode?
Yeah, I love how kind of Sarah and Ellis, it's obviously like a setup, right? Like we know that it's a setup, and then they kind of do like good cop, bad cop on him, and like Ellis loses his cool and has to step outside, and then like when she steps outside, like he's calm again because again, it was all an act and it was all a setup. So that was a really interesting scene, and I'm interested to see how it will play out, like how Sarah will try to use Jamie or play Jamie and how all of that is going to kind of work out this season.
So the question I have is, looking at that scene, is what do you think that what leverage do you think as right now, before, we get to the end of this episode and how that plays into things, but like what leverage do you think they could have over Jamie to like kind of push him over the edge away from the Duttons?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I think maybe right now in Jamie's mind, like Beth has all of the leverage, right? Like you can't get worse than her kind of turning him in for shooting his dad and, trying to cover that up. So I don't know if maybe Sarah does have something that she could use that would kind of outweigh that, or if she's just going to try to play at just kind of like his politician side of like, if we can get your dad out of the way, like maybe we can set you up. And then then would she play Jamie in a way that he would then trust her and then maybe confide in her that Beth has something on him, and then they could work together to kind of get him out of that situation. But it seems to me like that would not be a good idea to trust Sarah, because she's not in it to help Jamie. She's in it to help market equities and to help herself. So I hope Jamie doesn't kind of trust her.
I mean, like, I think we see her kind of greasing him at the beginning, like, oh, you're good. Like, I didn't expect, and so at watching that this morning, I was just thinking, I was like, I hope Jamie can see how insulting, like, the way that she praises him was basically like, well, it's Montana, these are dumb rednecks. And, like I said, like I didn't expect to see lawyers who are, sophisticated and stuff like that. Like, I hope he's able to see how like he's being played from the beginning. And if he can't, then I think he deserves whatever, whatever comes from that. Like he wasn't meant to be the person that he thinks he is anyway, if he can't see that play coming a mile away because it's there.
Exactly. I mean, like, she just came to town, so she doesn't have a lot of context on him. So why is she going to like all of a sudden be so interested in Jamie and like be interested enough to invite him to dinner, or just think that he's a shit, essentially. So it's very obviously like a play they're playing him. So hopefully Jamie won't fall into that trap, but we'll see.
We shall see. He did seem like he was, at least ready for the darts they were going to throw at him about shutting down the airport deal. Like he had all those things. I also saw that he saw that a lot of this fight was futile, and that like it's something that's ultimately going to hurt them in the long range. So like my question for you, like, do you think John is is going to be able to balance the self interest that he has with the ranch with the like pragmatic interest that he should have for the state of Montana? Because Sarah laid out a lot of good points. Like,
Yeah.
if we could just pull things away, these developments from these businesses, they're going to leave,
Yeah.
and that revenue is not going to the state of Montana, and it's going to hurt everybody. Instead of we could work in some type of way to only hurt the ranch, to a
Mhm.
degree, instead of the entire state of Montana. Do you think John's going to be able to balance those two interests? Is he capable of that?
That's a good question because is he capable? I think he may be, but I don't think he's capable of that right now. It seems like right now he has like such tunnel vision of like I'm just doing this to save my ranch, to save my land, and he said it multiple times. So at this point I think it's going to be very very hard for him to kind of see that. Um and I don't want to give him too much credit, right? But I think in the long run, he might, again, like you said, be a little bit more pragmatic and,
Mm.
um, be more compromising.
Right.
But right now, I don't think so.
Just less dug in. Like he's so intractable on these things,
Mhm.
which we saw in the last episode, where Jamie's trying to tell him, like, "Hey, if this happens, then this will happen. This is guaranteed to
Right.
happen, and this is how we can be hurt, or this is how we can be liable, or vulnerable."
And he's not even
Also,
lying about it too. Like Jamie is like telling him the truth. Like he's not
right.
even trying to play John. So I understand why they don't want to trust Jamie or listen to Jamie. But also at the same time, like he's actually like trying to give you like counsel as to they're gonna not just sue you as the governor or the state, they're gonna sue you personally, John Dutton. So that's not something that you want.
And I think that's what Jamie's like value is the best, is because he can act as an very impartial party in this. Where Beth, while Beth is effective in what she does, she's too close. And
Yeah.
even when she can see and she's told, like, hey, there's a great chance that we lose this ranch because all these different factors that are hard to avoid. But she's still always going to act primarily in his interest, where at least Jamie, we can say like he's acting in just the most pragmatic interests possible.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
even if that upsets John or upsets Beth, like
Right.
he's acting with a clear, objective mind, and that's what John needs in his corner right now. Which I
Mhm.
think it was a mistake to make Beth chief of staff. Um, I think it limits her effectiveness in a certain way, because instead of just being able to kind of sick her on different
Right.
missions, like she's kind of laser focused on just that.
Yeah.
Um, before we get back to Beth, this after the flashback, we also see um, Beth and Rip in the morning. Beth is getting up to go to Salt Lake
Mhm.
for business on her father's behalf, of course. Um, what do you think about the dynamic between Beth and Rip this season so far? Newly married couple, a lot of history between them, as we've seen in one flashback. What do you think about the dynamic between those two so far this season?
I really like it because Beth is showing a lot more vulnerability than she had before in previous seasons. With that scene where they were talking about her mom, and she's talking about a memory can't love you back. And then she's pretty strong, and then when she walks away, I can see her getting teary eyed. So I love that she's being a little bit more vulnerable, always helpful in a relationship. That relationship is pretty toxic though, just because of who's in it. So maybe like adding some vulnerability will make it a little bit less toxic, but maybe not in this episode yet.
And speaking of like vulnerability, um, we starting to see like some layers get peeled off of Rip piece by piece, and through his interactions with Carter. Um, this may be the first episode like he didn't like severely curse him out, like
Yeah.
admonish him about some small benign mistake that he made. It's interesting, like we talked about it last week, but just how both Beth and Rip, like you can kind of see the parallels between them both learning how to love in different ways.
Mhm.
Rip, his love comes through the relatability in their educations. Like these are two orphans
Yeah.
who come to this ranch with nothing, no knowledge of the world outside of the struggles and stuff that they had to endure as kids. And we see like the next person. For Rip it was John, for Carter is Rip is just learning how to be a man in that particular world that they live in. So it's interesting, like the two scenes that we see Carter in, we see him like really worried about calves and really worried about these animals. And I think Rip, who has a deep passion for this cowboy life, I think that's very relatable for him, and I think he
Mhm.
respects that a lot. And he's starting to see so much of himself. Like I don't think Carter has the same darkness
Right.
that Rip has, even though like they've gone through similar things, similar experiences to a degree. But just Rip just kind of sees that love for what they do, and even though they're two different personalities, of course, like they do have the same loves, right? So
Mhm.
that's where we see Rip kind of demonstrating that love is in the relatability that he has with Carter. And the other scene we see, before the ending, which we'll talk about, is they're Rip and Carter at the table, just having like a, look what looks like a father son dinner. So it's interesting seeing like the dynamic between Beth and Rip, along with Carter, play out, and just seeing him grow into himself, Carter be himself, and then growing into the little family like that. It looks like they're building.
Mhm.
Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought that was really nice. I love that they've also kept like eating dinner at that smaller table in kind of like the living area. I love that they kept that from the previous season. And you can see like even Beth becoming more like maternal, I guess, towards Carter, when they're getting ready to leave later on in the episode and they're going to the bar, like just like, okay, like bye, baby. So that was like really nice to see just like little things like that that really show you how much they have been growing throughout this season and whatever else has happened, between the seasons, the life that happened. Um, but I thought that was just like really sweet, just like that little like bye baby that Beth was calling Carter. So I really enjoyed that.
Also at the ranch, it is. Well, okay, we'll get to that. Let's talk about. Well, I was going to bring up Lloyd and his birthday, but we'll talk about that. Um, with Kayce and Monica.
Mhm.
Um, so this is, of course, this is after Monica lost the baby after the car accident that she and Tate got into. Um, we see Rainwater and his assistant, whose name I always forget,
Mo.
Mo. We see them there at Kayce and Monica's house, um, talking about spirits. What did you think about that scene? And like, do you think that the Monica and Kayce story has really added? What do you think it has added to the storyline so far this season?
Mhm. I really like that scene. That one was probably like one of my favorite scenes of that episode, because to me, um, it was like more in depth and it really showed like them going through their mourning process. And like they even mentioned it had only been 4 days at this point, and for some reason in my mind I thought like a little bit more time had elapsed. But it was nice to see because like right after the accident we see just kind of John and Beth there, and they don't really know what to say to like Kayce and to Tate, right? Because it's all just so new. But then it was nice to see the dynamic where like Rainwater and Mo were just kind of talking to them about spirits and just kind of wanting to help guide them through like the next step of the mourning process. So I really liked it. It kind of got me in my feelings a little bit. Um, and it will be just kind of interesting to see how they can mourn, go through the mourning and the grieving process together, or if it's something that kind of tears them apart. But at first, like we see Monica and she seems like she's accepting everything and, you know, she's kind of understanding everything. But then when she goes in the house and she has that moment where like the grief overcomes her and then she cuts her hair, I thought that was just really powerful too, when she's just trying to be strong, but then like once she's in the house and away from everybody, she just kind of breaks down a little bit. So again, it'll be interesting to see like how they both kind of go through their own grieving process, that they each have to do individually, but also as a couple.
And I love how even through like the grief in the morning, like the show is still demonstrating like the differences in like cultural mourning, right? Like cutting the hair, like he's like, to Kayce, this is, I have to rush in and save her.
Right.
And Rainwater and Mo stop him like, hey, this is something she has to do. Like this is
Right.
part of the culture. And it shows like there's still things about the culture that Kayce, as long as they've been married and having a kid, and you know, there's just certain things he doesn't fully understand. And that's kind of like the chasm that keeps coming between those two. So like I said, it is interesting to see how where their relationship goes. Does it evolve into like they grow more into each other, or does it further distance them? Like, because Kayce made a big career decision. Like he decided to quit being a, you know, livestock commissioner, which puts him closer, of course, to Monica and Tate, especially in this time where, you know, they're all grieving and they need each other. But it also takes him further away from his father and the vision and the path that his father's kind of laid out for not just him, but for Beth and for Jamie as well. You know, Jamie a little bit less so, but what this leads into like another major thing that could be happening throughout the season, which is the dynamic between John and Kayce. So far we've seen in the first couple seasons this really strained relationship between John and Kayce, because Kayce has kind of left the nest more so than the rest of the kids, and you know, he came back with a lot of baggage from war and things like that. He's, you know, married a woman who ideologically, culturally is opposite from his family. So, and we've seen that relationship kind of, you know, make its own way back to each other. They're in a much better place, obviously, with the fact that they were going to name their second son John after his father. How much of a strain, if any, will Kayce leaving his post have on their relationship going forward?
That's a great question. I think it was a good sign that John kind of like hesitated a little bit and he's kind of like, you know, are you sure about this? But then when Kayce was like, yes, you know, like this is what I need to do for my family. I think he says, John tells him like Montana needs you or we need you. And he says, well, you know, my family needs me more. Monica needs me more. I thought that was great. I love how he's putting his family first. But also how John, like after Kayce said that, he understood that, right? So I think maybe John has a little bit more of a different perspective now. Now that maybe he's in kind of like the governor's seat and knows like how hard it is just to kind of walk that line between like your job and what you feel like you have to do and like your obligations to family or to your home. But also maybe just knowing just like the trauma that Kayce has just gone through, right? He lost his child in a very traumatic way. So I think maybe that gave John a little bit more compassion towards Kayce and made him a little bit more understanding, and was just kind of like, okay, like this is what you have to do. Like, that's fine. I may not like it, but totally respect that. And then, when they go to find a place to bury baby John, I thought that was just a nice moment. And it was nice because we hadn't really seen that from John, right? Like he was at the hospital and he was sad, but we hadn't like seen him kind of help Kayce through the process like Mo and like the chairman had been. So yeah, I think maybe this is also just kind of softening up John a little bit.
It's also interesting that came after the talk that John and Beth had outside on the porch, where he made sure to talk about how magnificent their mother was, and also I think it was last episode where he talked about how basically he ruined his kids in a certain way. I think he's starting. I think part of this is him reflecting. I think these flashbacks are not just reflecting on the obstacles that come with having a ranch. Part of those obstacles is a toll that protecting this land and protecting this ranch and this dynasty has had on his relationship with his kids. And part of that reflection is, like you said, there's understanding like he needs to be softer. He needs to, he needs to think outside of just what is best for the ranch, generationally, economically, financially, whatever. Like he has to think more of it. And this goes back to like his new position being governor, where he's been so tunnel vision about my ranch, and not thinking about the entire state of Montana. He also has to do that with his children.
Yeah. And I think, sorry. I was just going to say, I think maybe he respected Kayce a little too, because Kayce was doing something out of what he feels his family needs. Whereas John, it seems like he's always, obviously he loves his family and he's always wanted to do right by them. But it seems like most of his actions are like, I need to do this for my land and for my ranch or for my legacy, right? But not so much as like, oh, I need to do this for my family. So maybe he respects that Kayce has been able to do that, while that has probably been something that's a little bit has been difficult for John. And John knows like what he's lost. He's lost his wife, and now his family's just kind of disjointed, right? He has Beth on one side who's really devoted to him, but then he has Jamie who he can't trust, but he still loves. So I think maybe he respects Kayce a little bit in that, he's willing to do something for his wife and for his kids.
So you don't think that that there's going to be any residual effects? Part of me thinks that all of this is leading Kayce back to John in some type of way, back to the ranch in some type of way. Rainwater talked about like Kayce's skill set. And it's like, we know that Kayce has a special set of skills that kind of have been underutilized in his position as livestock commissioner. And I wonder how much of his skills Kayce wants to actually use still, right? But if he's down to use them, then there's certainly a fight that's about to happen that, he could be very beneficial for. So we'll see how that shakes out with John and Kayce, and what Kayce decides to do career-wise, and how far or how close that brings him back to the Yellowstone ranch. So it's interesting to see. Beth goes to Salt Lake. Beth has a major move to make here. So what did you think about that scene? And how much of a nuclear bomb did she just throw into this conflict with market equities?
I just enjoyed how much she enjoyed it, how much she knew it was going to screw over market equities. And I love her whole like rattlesnake thing where she's like, I'm the rattlesnake, but you're not who I'm going to bite, and the other person that she's making the deal with is like, I'm not too sure about this, Beth. Like, what if you're trying to screw me over? And she's like, no, I'm not trying to screw you over. I'm trying to screw somebody else over. And you're just kind of, helping me do it. But that was just such a fun scene to watch because it's Beth in her element, just kind of scheming, charming somebody, into kind of going along with her. So that was just a really fun scene to watch.
So one of my side notes about Yellowstone, and this may be a slight criticism, I'm not sure yet, but Yellowstone on one hand will make it seem like there's literally nothing that the Duttons can do to keep this ranch in one breath. Say it's economically impossible. Everything's headed this way toward it. And then Yellowstone also in one move, in one broad stroke, like eliminate or halfway eliminate a competition to said land and to the ranch. So I thought it was an interesting scene. I was trying to really follow along with like all the way like these deals would happen, and I knew ultimately it's taking a lot of revenue from market equities, and when we take a lot of revenue from a large publicly traded corporation, and somebody's head has to roll. It's interesting looking at this scene while also looking at the last scene of this episode to kind of see how Beth's ruthlessness / impulsiveness, can both benefit and hurt at the same time, because she makes this move with the full understanding that it's gloves off after this. Right? Like they're like market equities is going to be desperate, and market equities has a ton of resources and a lot of money, way more than the Duttons do. And she knows this. So I wonder, like, we'll talk about this at the very end, but like just going forward, I wonder if she can see the different ways that they can be vulnerable, especially with, I forgot her name, Carolyn Weaver setting Sarah Atwood basically loose and basically saying, hey, the gloves are coming off. We're going to play really dirty. So very interested in see if Beth can think 2-3 steps ahead to this dirty pool game that's certainly coming.
Yeah, because I think she also mentions that, right? She's telling during the business deal, she's saying, well, like I'm one step ahead of them right now, but you have to like say yes to this deal right now because I'm not 2 steps ahead of me. Like they're right behind me. So she knows what the stakes are. She knows that they've unleashed against Sarah on her, that they're about to fight. So she's gearing up for this fight, literally and figuratively. So you could definitely tell like the urgency that she had when she's trying to make this deal. She's trying to keep it cool, obviously, but the undertone is like, you have to like accept this deal because you have to help me, because if you don't, like, I don't know what else I'm going to do at this point. They're like right at my back.
Right. So like we see basically two entities that are desperate in different ways. Like the Duttons are obviously desperate to find a way to stop this incursion that's happening on their land, and market equities thought they had this large leverage over the Duttons and realized that hey, a few moves might happen and you no longer have that leverage. So what next? Last time this happened, this led to a lot of some attempted murders and a lot of blood. So it looks like this is where it's happening. Lastly, as far as this particular episode goes, it's Lloyd's 58th birthday. And I thought the show in so many ways sets out to remind Lloyd of his lack of youth. Like first, everybody's brushing their teeth in the restroom, and guitar cowboy, I forgot his name.
Walker.
Walker and his old girlfriend. Again, bad with names. But
I think her name is Laramie, the blonde one, right?
Laramie, right? Yeah. So they're in the shower, unbeknownst to everybody else. And again, this is the girl Lloyd had a big crush on last season, and just found out he was a few decades too late on that. Just a little bit. So we also see like the growth from that, because he didn't react well to that unrequited crush last season. That led to some issues with him and Rip, obviously. But we see that, but just the constant jokes about his age. And for me, I took that as just showing like how much of a lifer you have to be in that business. Like Lloyd is a lifer. Like we've seen flashbacks of young Lloyd. And now we see the older Lloyd with these, again, constant reminders of his age and just how long he's been at this. Um, what did you think about that scene before we talk about, the bar scene?
I really like that scene because you can really tell how much um like the actors really have a lot of really great chemistry, right? Like they have to be offset friends because this on set, like on camera friendship really shines through. So I really liked that scene that they were just kind of picking on him, saying, like, you're 58, like, are you sure? So that was just really nice to see a little bit of like levity from like other like really like dark parts that happened in this episode earlier. So it was just kind of nice to see bunkhouse life, how they even though there's like all like the shit going on like outside of the ranch about the ranch, like in the bunkhouse they're just kind of living their life, and it's um just kind of a moment of just being carefree and just being friends and just kind of just shooting the shit. So that was a really fun scene to watch.
Yeah, and so that leads to the ranchers, they're celebrating Lloyd's birthday the way they always do with card games and shit talking. Um, and Beth, who had just pulled off this major coup against market equities, she wants to celebrate. She doesn't want to celebrate in the regular way. She wants to go out. From as a Yellowstone viewer, all the Yellowstone viewers have seen pretty much every time we go to the bar, something bad happens. So they warn pretty pretty clearly about going to a bar. But what Beth wants, Beth gets. So they go to a bar. Seems like everybody's having a good time. I kept looking at the time like maybe nothing bad will happen, right? Against my better judgment. It reminded me of a House of the Dragon. Like there was a wedding scene, and Game of Thrones viewers know there's a wedding and it's being shown. Something bad is going to happen. So same thing here. I'm just looking like, like we got there. Rip sent a shot, whiskey down to a rancher that they knew, had a great relationship with. I saw that go well. I was like, okay, we might make it to the end of this episode. We did not make it to the end of this episode. As Rip is standing there with one of his maybe 3 smiles in the entire series,
right?
Admiring his wife, having fun, and everybody else around having fun. A woman comes up and hits on Rip. Leads to our episode title, "Aren't you a tall drink of water?" And Rip, trying to diffuse, knowing who his wife is. He asked about her husband. She says, "Hey, my husband's not here. He's in Sacramento." So Rip at this point understands that something bad is going to happen, right? So he lets her know that his wife is staring a hole into her soul. And the woman did not take the cue, did not walk away, decides to walk over and keep going, clearly drunk, clearly slurring all of her words, clearly can't walk straight to do this.
Not making good decisions at this point.
Not making good decisions, right? And that her bad decision will lead to more bad decisions from everyone else, because Beth, we see it's quick cut to Beth hitting this woman over the head with a bottle, breaking a beer bottle over her head, and just thoroughly beating the shit out of this woman. Let's talk about Beth as in this particular scene, and then Beth kind of on a broader macro scale. What do you think about the decision that Beth made? How do you think that's going to play out going forward? And then we can talk about just Beth. I want to talk about Beth as character, where she's been so far in the series and where we think she can go going forward. But let's start with just this particular scene.
I mean, as a woman, right, I get how like seeing like some drunk hussy like trying to snuggle up next to your man would kind of put me in a position where I might want to break a bottle over some bitch's head. But I'm smart enough to know like probably not going to end well. Like you're probably going to get in trouble. Like that's assault. Like you don't want to go to jail, right? Like you definitely don't want to go to jail.
And you're not just some famous rancher's daughter.
Right. you're
anymore.
like the chief of staff and daughter of the governor. So Beth is just really impulsive, not only in this scene, obviously, but in life. And I think that may be her ultimate downfall, right? Like she's a great schemer and she, can really take somebody down, but I think her impulsiveness also could bring her down. But I mean, all hell just broke loose. And that was another scene that was just really fun to watch. And you're like, oh my gosh, why are you doing this? Like, you didn't really have to like knock a bottle like over her head.
You did not. Clearly, this woman can take a punch. So like,
exactly. So,
I
they
think
finally made it outside, and then like she clocks her again. So I was like, Beth, are you serious? But it was funny because like once like I guess the police were going to cuff her, she had kind of has her head turned and she kind of like winks at the lady. And I was like, you're just taunting her again. So it was just really fun to watch Beth like that because toxic Beth makes for really great television, but definitely not for great personality traits.
Not great decision making in that.
No.
It's also with Beth, like she's win at all costs. Like everything we see about her is win at all costs. Like she wins every conversation, she wins every deal, wins every conflict. She is win at all costs, and she is never show weakness, which is counter to what we talked about with her and Rip and Carter, which is she's starting to show more vulnerability there at home. Whereas I think the situation with her father and with the ranch and all these and market equities and all these different conflicts have also sharpened her need to win at all costs. And she can't be both. You can't be like I'm growing, becoming more vulnerable while also being just ruthless at every turn. And being impulsive, right? She's trained to think 2-3 steps ahead in business, but not necessarily in her personal life. And she will sacrifice relationships, just sacrifice anything really to win in that particular moment. And we see that here. Like there's no reason. Like Rip was not giving this woman a time of day.
Right.
Like she could have given her a few one-liners and destroyed her soul and walked away. Right. But she had to demonstrate I'm the most powerful person. Like everything about this episode was her demonstrating how much in charge. When Rip says, hey, no, I said no, we're not going. She had to make it a point to show everybody else, like, no, actually your no means nothing. I'm in charge.
Right.
And that gets her in trouble. I wonder what you thought about the fact that the show made the two sheriffs or the two officers black in this sense. And they clearly like, hey, things are different here. Like you can't just do what you want here. Do you think that that's going to be a major subplot going forward?
I definitely think so, because again, like they said, with the previous sheriff, he's friends with John. They've been friends for a long time. Like nothing probably was going to happen, but there's a sheriff that actually like wants to follow the law and like hold people accountable, which is obviously good, right? But I don't know how the Duttons are going to do with that, because they don't really they haven't been held to account ever, right? Because of who they are in that part of the state, right? Like the Duttons, like they have this big ranch and everybody like respects them. People look the other way. So yes, I'm really like dying to see like what happens now, how they kind of adjust to being held into account. And then how they navigate, like, okay, Beth has gotten arrested for like this assault, and then to see like, okay, what does this other person want? I'm really looking forward to kind of like Beth getting consequences. I think that's really like necessary, right? Like we love Beth because she's crazy, but at the same time, like it's kind of nice to see like characters have consequences for their actions.
Yeah, surely. I was talking to a friend earlier. I was like, yeah, surely the racial components of the police department will not play a role in this season going forward. Surely,
Right.
especially again, like you said, this is the royal family of Montana, basically the governor's family, and see how, in what ways she and they are going to be held accountable. And I think so much of what we're seeing with John and his governorship is them being held accountable in ways that they have not before. Like the state is changing in so many different ways, like demographically, so many changes, so much money is coming in because the land is fertile. And again, that's a form of accountability. Like, you've hoarded so much of this land and so much of these resources for so long, where there's going to be a lot of people coming from it. All right, so going forward, we got episode 4 next Sunday. It's titled "Horses in Heaven." What are your predictions for episode 4 based on what we saw last Sunday?
Yeah. So I definitely think there's going to be like more kind of to the wolf storyline as well, right? Because the last time we saw Rip and he's like, well, you don't want to go like over that mountain. You're not going to make it. Like, you're not a good cowboy. But they're like, okay, like we'll do it with the chopper. So I don't think that storyline is done. So I definitely want to see more of like what happens there. But also just this whole dynamic with Thomas Rainwater and Angela Bluefeather, like the protests against him, just kind of seeing what is going to happen there. It's just really interesting. She just seems very, very ruthless and very ready to take Thomas down, because as she sees it, he's just kind of sitting back and just kind of letting everybody else kind of get ahead, and he's not doing the best for like their people and what like is in their best interest. So she's ready to take him down. So I definitely want to see more of that, like more of like how she going to just kind of set up this other person to just kind of be a foil for Thomas, and to see like, hey, we also want progress, right? Not this leader isn't serving our best interest anymore.
Yeah. Also, how close are the I guess the park commissioners, the state, whoever, how close are they going to get to finding out what happened with those wolves on the Dutton Ranch? Clearly this is something Rip is and should be worried about. This is what all these flashbacks are kind of pointing towards. Also, will we see more flashbacks? What will we see in those flashbacks? Will we see? We do see a younger Kayce. I took a second look. I was trying to make sure, like, was that Kayce? So we see a younger Kayce. So I wonder, will we see more of the Dutton kids in those flashbacks? Maybe another flashback of John's wife. See what happened there. And obviously the major point here is, how is John going to react to? We see it a little bit in the trailer for next season, for next episode. But how is he going to react, and what are going to be his moves on getting Beth out of jail? How will Jamie play a role in this? We clearly see like he may be starting to use that as kind of reverse the leverage that she has on him. But
so
where are they going to go?
I wonder too, then, if that was a setup, if maybe she was sent in, maybe by Jamie or by Market Equities, to kind of bait Beth into a fight, because they know how reactive she is. They know that nothing could end well. So that was my thought too. Like, has she been sent in by somebody to kind of like cause this fight and to get Beth in trouble? So I want to see more of that and see how that plays out.
That's a great point. That's a great point, because it kind of parallels the setup for Jamie, right? Like just playing this role to kind of get them to react in some type of way. Like, this could be a Sarah Atwood special. All right, excellent point here. All right, so next, we can say we got episode 4 next Sunday. Hey, that's our show for today. Let's talk about how you can reach us. Follow us on social, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. TikTok, Insta, all the things, Finsta. I don't even know all the things. MySpace. At Watches at Basement. Join us, help us grow, rate us, review us, 5 stars, of course. You know, we try to deliver 2 to 3 episodes. We're adding more shows that we're covering, more movies. If you hadn't checked out our Monday pod, we ranked all 30 MCU films, led to some very spirited debates about all of those. So check us out on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Listen to us, give us a 5-star rating, Stitcher, all these things, man. So that's our episode for today. For Marcy, this is Tristan signing off. We'll see you next week when we are covering episode 4, Horses in Heaven. See you.
Bye.